Hello, grounded Taurus. As August 27th and 28th unfold, you may begin noticing something subtle beneath the surface. A part of your life that once felt secure may no longer feel quite as settled as it used to. This does not necessarily point to sudden disruption or a need to abandon everything familiar. Instead, it may be a quiet realization that your values have changed, and something you once held onto for comfort now deserves to be seen with fresh eyes. A new path may be forming in front of you, but your task is not to rush toward it simply because it is new. Your task is to notice what feels genuinely sustainable, what still has life in it, and what you may have continued carrying simply because you became accustomed to its weight. There is nothing wrong with hesitation when you are trying to make a meaningful choice. You do not need every detail arranged before you allow yourself to consider another direction, but you also do not have to force yourself into a leap just to prove that you are capable of changing. If something quietly brings you a sense of possibility, curiosity, or renewed energy, pay attention to that feeling without demanding that it immediately become a decision. Sometimes the first sign of movement is not a dramatic event at all. It is the moment you realize you are willing to imagine your life differently. You can move carefully and still move forward, and you can honor your need for security without allowing familiarity to become the reason you remain somewhere your heart has already begun to outgrow. As this shift develops, patience becomes especially important. There may be moments when you look around and wonder why nothing seems to be changing, particularly when you've already done the work and are waiting for circumstances to respond. But a quiet period does not automatically mean that you are stuck. Some changes begin underground, like roots strengthening before a new stem becomes visible, and your progress may be taking shape in ways that cannot yet be measured from the outside. What appears to be a pause may be giving you the space to decide what you actually want to carry into the next chapter, rather than simply repeating what you have always known. You may also encounter resistance, either from circumstances around you or from the part of yourself that prefers what is predictable. This is where discernment matters more than force. Ask yourself whether you are protecting something because it genuinely supports your well-being, or because leaving it would require you to admit that the time, energy, and hope you invested in it have changed meaning. You do not have to judge yourself for staying as long as you did. Sometimes a path teaches you what you needed to learn before you can recognize that another path would serve you better, and that recognition can be its own form of progress. The opportunities appearing around you may eventually connect with greater emotional and practical stability, but let yourself evaluate them rather than assuming that every open door is automatically the right one. A promising possibility is worth considering when it respects your values, your energy, and the life you are actually trying to build. You may notice movement around money, work, or a decision that has been waiting for greater clarity, yet the deeper question is not simply whether you can gain more. It is whether what you are building gives you a stronger sense of balance, dignity, and long-term security. What is valuable to you now may be very different from what impressed you in the past. Remember that progress does not have to be loud to be real. You may be closer to a meaningful shift than you realize, even if the evidence has not arrived in the form you expected. Rather than measuring your life by how quickly circumstances respond, pay attention to how differently you are responding to them. Perhaps you're becoming less willing to chase what once demanded your attention, less interested in proving yourself, and more capable of waiting for something that actually matches your standards. That is not passivity. It is a quieter kind of confidence, one that knows the difference between patience and postponement. Take this reading as a reflective guide rather than a fixed description of what must happen around you. Not every part of the message will necessarily mirror your circumstances, because your experiences, choices, relationships, and responsibilities are uniquely your own. Keep what gives you clarity, perspective, or a deeper understanding of yourself, and allow anything that does not resonate to simply pass by. The power to shape your direction remains with you, and astrology can offer a language for reflection without taking that responsibility away from your hands. As you consider the areas of love, work, money, health, and family, keep returning to one quiet question. What kind of life are you actually trying to make sustainable? You have a natural capacity for persistence, and when you believe something matters, you can devote yourself to it with remarkable consistency. But persistence becomes exhausting when it turns into the belief that you must keep carrying something simply because you have carried it for so long. There is strength in commitment, Taurus, but there is also strength in knowing when flexibility is the wiser form of commitment to yourself. You may find yourself reconsidering an important decision, a professional direction, or a responsibility that has demanded more from you than you expected. There could be communication connected with a project, an interview, a work opportunity, or another practical matter that deserve your attention, especially if you have been waiting for clearer information before making your next move. Listen carefully, but give yourself room to think before committing. Something does not become valuable simply because it arrives at the right moment, and you do not need to accept an opportunity out of fear that another one will never appear. At the same time, encouraging news from someone close to you may remind you that you are not carrying every part of this transition alone. And as you continue forward, there is another kind of movement asking for your attention: the decision to stop carrying what belongs to the past. Regret can become surprisingly heavy when it is attached to something familiar, because part of you may still remember the comfort, effort, or hope that once lived inside that situation. You may have stayed attached because you believed that if you waited long enough, repaired enough, or gave enough, the original promise would eventually return. But deep within you, there may already be a quieter understanding that something has changed, and that releasing an old attachment does not erase what it meant to you. It simply creates room for you to build something that reflects who you are now, rather than who you had to be when you first chose to stay. As August 27th and 28th unfold, Taurus, the energy around you invites a quieter kind of reflection and renewal. You may be realizing that the life you want now cannot be built entirely from the same choices that once made you feel secure. As a fixed earth sign associated with Venus, you often value what can be trusted, cultivated, and sustained over time. So change can feel meaningful only when it has a purpose. This reading speaks to a period of emotional clearing in which you are learning to recognize what still nourishes you, what has become familiar but empty, and where your definition of fulfillment is beginning to change. The Six of Swords speaks beautifully to this transition. You may have been moving through an emotional landscape shaped by disappointment, uncertainty, or circumstances that required you to carry more than you wanted to admit. Rather than imagining yourself escaping through a dramatic gesture, picture yourself gradually moving away from a shoreline that has become too difficult to remain on, carrying only what still deserves a place in your life. The card reminds you that progress sometimes means leaving behind a pattern you understand, even when the unfamiliar path ahead has not yet revealed where it leads. This can be especially meaningful if someone or something from your past begins to occupy your thoughts again. A familiar connection may appear different, perhaps softer or more mature, and you may wonder whether enough has truly changed for you to consider opening that door again. You do not have to decide from nostalgia, guilt, or the fear of losing something forever. Instead, notice whether the foundation itself has changed. For you, discernment is not coldness. It is the ability to ask whether what is being offered now can actually support the person you have become. Then comes the star, bringing a gentler quality of hope. After spending so much energy protecting yourself, you may slowly begin to trust that the future does not have to repeat the emotional landscape you have already survived. The star can symbolize renewed faith in your own direction, not because every uncertainty has disappeared, but because you are becoming less dependent on certainty before allowing yourself to move forward. Let this hope remain grounded. You do not need to idealize someone simply because they seem changed, and you do not need to close your heart simply because the past taught you to be careful. The Two of Cups brings the question of mutuality into focus. Whether this relates to someone new or to a relationship you're reassessing, the deeper issue is not intensity for its own sake, but whether both people are genuinely meeting each other with honesty, respect, and consistency. You may be less interested now in promises that sound beautiful and more attentive to the small behaviors that reveal whether trust can actually grow. If someone from the past appears renewed, allow their actions over time to tell you more than their words, because emotional safety is something that gets built through repetition rather than announced in a single conversation. The Death card then introduces a deeper transformation. For Taurus, This symbolism can touch one of the most important inner questions of this period. What happens when something you have protected for a long time no longer reflects your present values? You may not need to destroy your foundations, but you may need to renovate them, releasing an attachment, expectation, or old definition of security that has quietly become restrictive. What changes here is not your capacity to remain devoted. It is your understanding of what deserves your devotion. There is strength in allowing that process to happen without forcing it. The Strength card speaks of quiet self-command, the kind of power that does not need to prove itself through confrontation or control. You can forgive without reopening a door, remain compassionate without abandoning your boundaries, and consider a new opportunity without immediately committing to it. The more deeply you trust your own values, the less you need to react from fear, and the easier it becomes to recognize which relationships and opportunities respect the ground you have worked so hard to build. Your body may also be asking you to pay attention to what your mind has been carrying. When you spend too long maintaining responsibilities, solving problems, or trying to keep everything stable, physical fatigue can quietly accumulate before you realize how much you have been asking of yourself. You may benefit from slowing your pace, sleeping more consistently, stepping away from constant demands, taking a gentle walk, or simply giving yourself moments when you do not have to accomplish anything. Asking for help or allowing someone else to share the weight is not a failure of independence. Sometimes it is the most practical way to protect your energy. Move through these days with greater awareness of your body and surroundings as well. When the mind is preoccupied, even ordinary movements can become rushed, and small moments of carelessness can create unnecessary discomfort. You do not need to move through life as though everything requires immediate attention. There is something deeply grounding about putting your feet where you intend to place them, slowing down enough to notice your surroundings, and letting your body remind you that you are here before you ask it to carry you toward the next responsibility. In your professional life, there is evidence of progress, even if part of you continues to believe there is always more that should be accomplished. You have likely built credibility through consistency, patience, and the ability to keep going when others might have lost interest, but this may also be the moment to look beyond the routine you have become comfortable with. Notice the people around you, the perspectives you may have overlooked, and the possibilities that become visible when you stop assuming that the path you know is automatically the path you should remain on. Your next stage of growth may not require you to work harder. It may ask you to see your own experience from a wider perspective and make room for what could be built from there. There are people who have quietly noticed the consistency you bring to your work, even if they have not always taken the time to say it directly. The way you show up, follow through, and keep your standards steady can speak more clearly than praise ever could. And some people may even feel uncertain around the firmness with which you protect the quality of what you do, but their reactions do not need to become part of your compass. Keep your attention on the kind of life and professional foundation you are trying to build, rather than constantly comparing your progress with someone else's timeline. Your direction becomes much easier to recognize when you stop asking whether everyone approves of your choices and begin asking whether those choices still reflect the values you want your life to stand on. An unexpected professional opportunity could also cross your path around this period. You may not have been looking for anything different, which could make the possibility feel both intriguing and slightly disruptive, especially if your current situation has given you a familiar sense of security. You do not have to decide the moment something new appears. Give yourself enough room to examine it carefully before attaching emotion to either possibility. Look at the responsibilities, workplace culture, stability, compensation, room for development, and the effect it would have on the life you're actually trying to create. If another option or counteroffer appears, compare the entire landscape rather than allowing urgency, flattery, or fear of making the wrong choice to decide for you. You may even discover that the most important question is not simply which opportunity is better, but which one gives me a structure I can genuinely live with. A position can look impressive on paper and still leave you feeling depleted, while something less flashy may offer the consistency, autonomy, and breathing room that allow you to thrive over time. Give yourself permission to notice how each possibility feels in your body, as well as how it looks on paper. For you, the right decision may be the one that offers enough growth to keep you engaged without requiring you to sacrifice every piece of stability you have worked so hard to create. If you are building a business or developing something of your own, remember that protecting your vision does not mean carrying every responsibility alone. You may know exactly what you want the finished result to feel like, but that does not mean you need to personally control every step required to get there. The strongest foundation is often created when different skills, experiences, and perspectives are allowed to reinforce the original idea. You can listen carefully to another person's approach without surrendering your core values, and you can change the structure without losing the purpose underneath it. Real leadership is not simply refusing to bend. Sometimes it is knowing which beings need to remain strong and which parts of the structure can be redesigned so the whole creation has more room to grow. When it comes to money, the inner work you've been doing may be changing the way you understand security and resources. You may be becoming less interested in accumulating simply for the reassurance of having more and more interested in understanding what is genuinely worthy of your time, money, energy, and attention. That shift can change the way you spend, save, invest, and even say no to things that once seemed difficult to refuse. Releasing an old attachment can create space for more intentional choices, much like clearing crowded soil before planting something you actually want to cultivate. The purpose is not to chase abundance as a prize, but to build a relationship with resources that feels balanced, conscious, and capable of supporting the life you want over the long term. You may also begin recognizing value in a person, connection, collaboration, or possibility that you would once have overlooked. Someone within your wider circle could offer a practical perspective, make a useful introduction, or bring an idea that fits naturally with something you are already developing. Stay receptive, but let discernment walk beside your openness. Your generosity is one of your strengths, yet wisdom asks you to give because you genuinely choose to, not because you feel responsible for making everyone else's plans work. The clearer you become about your priorities, the easier it is to tell the difference between an opportunity that deserves your investment and one that simply looks attractive because it has arrived at an emotionally tempting moment. This is a period for thoughtful movement rather than impulsive risk. You do not have to choose between staying completely protected and throwing yourself into uncertainty. There is a middle ground where you can test an idea, ask questions, gather information, make adjustments, and still move steadily towards something unfamiliar. Your patience becomes an advantage when you use it to build rather than postpone, allowing promising possibilities to develop roots before you place too much weight on them. Sometimes the most intelligent move is not the fastest one, but the one that gives you enough information to move with confidence instead of fear. Keep your attention on the longer view, because something that looks modest in the beginning can become deeply meaningful when it reflects your values and receives enough time to mature. And when you turn toward love, there is something tender within you asking to be expressed. You may want your relationship to deepen, become more honest, or simply feel alive again. Yet you can sometimes keep so much inside that the person beside you has to guess what is happening beneath the surface. You may think that showing love means finding the perfect moment or saying something profound, when sometimes what the other person needs most is simply evidence that you are emotionally present. You do not have to transform yourself into someone dramatically expressive, and you do not need a grand declaration to prove how deeply you care. A sincere sentence, a thoughtful touch, a shared meal after a long day, or the simple choice to put your phone aside and give someone your full attention can communicate more than a carefully prepared speech. Let yourself soften into those ordinary moments instead of waiting for some extraordinary scene to make intimacy feel meaningful. If you find yourself walking together, sitting quietly watching the evening settle around you, or sharing a familiar place that already feels comfortable to both of you, allow the conversation to emerge from what you genuinely feel rather than from what you think you are supposed to say. You can talk about something small that stayed with you during the day, admit that you missed someone, or simply acknowledge that being together feels good. You do not need perfect language to create emotional closeness. What matters is that the other person can feel your attention, your sincerity, and your willingness to meet them without hiding behind composure. Love becomes more nourishing when it has somewhere real to land, and those quiet moments can sometimes reveal more than the most carefully planned gesture. If you're single, you may sometimes approach attraction as though there is a correct sequence you need to follow before you can trust what you feel. You might analyze every signal, weigh every possibility, notice every inconsistency, and wait until you are certain that taking a step will lead somewhere worthwhile. That caution can protect you from rushing into situations that do not fit your values, but it can also become a wall if you demand certainty before allowing curiosity to have a place. Love rarely offers that kind of guarantee, and the desire to protect yourself from disappointment can sometimes prevent you from discovering what a simple, genuine connection might become. You do not have to solve the entire story before allowing yourself to begin the conversation. Sometimes the first honest exchange is simply a way of finding out whether there is something here worth knowing more deeply. There may be someone who has quietly caught your attention, someone who has crossed your mind more than once, even though very little has actually happened between you yet. Maybe you have exchanged a few words, noticed an unexpected ease when you were around each other, or wondered whether there could be something more beneath that small spark of curiosity. Still, part of you may be waiting for enough certainty before you allow yourself to move closer, because you naturally want to know whether something has substance before you invest your heart in it. Let yourself become a little more receptive to what is unfolding naturally. You do not need to make a grand gesture or decide the future of the connection before giving it space to breathe. A simple conversation, a casual invitation, or an honest expression of interest may be enough to discover whether there is something here that deserves your attention and care. Venus, traditionally associated with Taurus, offers a useful reminder here that meaningful connection does not always grow through effort or pursuit. Sometimes it develops through warmth, attentiveness, shared comfort, small gestures, and the quiet feeling that you can simply be yourself beside another person without constantly wondering how you are being perceived. If you are single, authenticity matters far more than performance. You do not need to become more impressive, mysterious, confident, or emotionally polished than you really are. Let someone encounter the person who exists beneath the careful presentation, because anything lasting needs real soil to grow in. If you have to keep maintaining an image for someone to remain interested, that connection may already be asking you to give more than it can genuinely return. Your family relationships may also begin reflecting the changes taking place within you. As you become clearer about your emotional needs, boundaries, and personal values, you may find it easier to communicate without dragging every old misunderstanding into the present. Some tensions that once seemed permanent can soften when people become willing to speak with more honesty and less defensiveness, and trust may be rebuilt through small, dependable actions rather than one dramatic conversation that is expected to fix everything at once. Your role within the family does not have to be about carrying everyone's emotions or keeping every relationship intact through your own effort. Sometimes your deepest contribution is showing that you can care deeply about the people you love, while still allowing each person to walk their own path. Let your home become a place where change does not automatically feel threatening. You can create that atmosphere through simple choices, listening before reacting, saying what you genuinely need, making room for another person's perspective, and refusing to let old resentment speak on your behalf. A shared meal, a familiar tradition, a quiet conversation in the evening, or even an ordinary experience enjoyed together can slowly restore warmth where distance has developed. You do not have to force closeness. Sometimes consistency creates more healing than intensity ever could. When family members feel respected rather than managed, change becomes easier to tolerate, and relationships have more room to become honest without losing that important sense of belonging. As these perspectives begin to shift, unresolved matters may also look different to you. You may discover that certain problems do not require a flawless solution, as much as they require a different way of approaching them, especially when you are no longer reacting from the same emotional place you occupied before. Something that once felt like a threat may simply become information about what you need, what you value, or what you are no longer willing to carry. Your own growth can change the atmosphere around you because your responses are changing first. There can be more patience, more understanding, and a greater willingness to imagine a future that does not have to reproduce every difficult pattern simply because it has existed for a long time. Your energy may feel steady, but it is not unlimited. You can accomplish what matters and still reach a point where continuing to push requires more from you than the task itself is worth. Pay attention to the difference between being capable of doing something and having the physical or emotional reserves to keep doing it without consequence. You may have become so accustomed to being dependable that you continue through tiredness simply because you know you can. But part of your growth now is learning that rest does not interrupt your progress. Sometimes it protects the progress you have already made and gives your body enough room to recover before you ask it for more. Be especially mindful of rigidity. You may prefer knowing what to expect, keeping familiar routines, and making sure the important pieces of your life remain securely in place. But there is a meaningful difference between stability and control. Stability gives you somewhere solid to stand. Control can make you believe that everything must remain exactly as planned before you are allowed to relax. Not every change needs to be solved immediately, and not every uncertainty means that something is going wrong. You do not have to prove your worth by managing every detail perfectly. Sometimes trust means remaining grounded while allowing a situation to reveal what it is, knowing that you can respond when something genuinely requires your attention. If you are a student, this may be a demanding stretch filled with assignments, exams, projects, classes, or responsibilities that require sustained concentration. Your organization and consistency can help you move through the workload effectively. But remember that productivity does not mean keeping your mind switched on every minute you are awake. When you finally step away from your books, notes, or screen, give yourself permission to recognize what you actually accomplished instead of immediately searching for the next mistake or unfinished task. You can care deeply about your goals without turning every small imperfection into evidence that you are falling behind. Discipline becomes much healthier when it is accompanied by enough compassion to let you recover. There is a tendency to notice what remains unfinished far more easily than what has already been completed. For a moment, turn your attention in the opposite direction and look at the ground you have already covered, including the effort that nobody else may have noticed. You may be doing considerably better than your inner critic allows you to believe, and you do not have to wait until everything is perfect before giving yourself credit. Let yourself breathe, settle back into your own rhythm, and acknowledge that steady progress still counts even when it happens quietly. There is strength in being able to say, honestly, I have done enough for today, without feeling that you have somehow abandoned your ambition. When it comes to compatibility, the most supportive connections for you are likely to be those that respect your natural pace, while still encouraging you to remain open to life. Sagittarius energy can bring movement, humor, curiosity, and playfulness into your world, reminding you that not every worthwhile experience needs to be planned from beginning to end before you allow yourself to enjoy it. Their influence may gently pull you beyond a familiar routine without asking you to abandon the grounding that makes you feel secure. Around this energy, you may rediscover a lighter part of yourself, especially when responsibility has occupied so much of your attention that simple enjoyment begins to feel like something you have to earn. Cancer energy can offer another kind of resonance through emotional sensitivity, loyalty, protectiveness, and a natural desire to create spaces where people feel cared for. Around this energy, you may be reminded that security is not only about what you can maintain, predict, or control. It can also come from being understood and having enough trust to show the softer parts of yourself without immediately trying to protect them. Virgo energy can bring a different but complementary quality, offering practical attention, thoughtful observation, and a willingness to improve what is already being built rather than simply holding on to it because it is familiar. The healthiest compatibility for you is not about finding someone who fits a fixed formula or guarantees a certain outcome. It is about recognizing relationships where trust, reciprocity, reliability, and mutual respect have enough room to grow naturally. So, Taurus, move through this period with a little less pressure to have everything figured out and a little more trust in what you are discovering about yourself along the way. You are not being asked to abandon your foundations, discard everything familiar, or prove that you can change overnight. You are being invited to notice which parts of your foundation still support you and which parts may need to be repaired, rearranged, or gently released. Let love be honest. Let family relationships breathe. Let your work have boundaries, and let your own effort count, even when nobody else is there to applaud it. There is a quieter kind of fulfillment available when you stop demanding absolute certainty before moving forward and begin choosing with greater care and self-respect what is genuinely worth building.